Hello and welcome to Libertarians at Large. My name is Dan Fishman. I am the Executive Director of the Libertarian Party, and I am so happy to have you all here this evening because we are going to have a spirited discussion with several of the at-large members of the Libertarian Party. Now, as you know, of course, there are all sorts of laws that prevent all of the at-large libertarians from assembling at any one point. I'm just kidding. We wouldn't respect those laws anyway, but with no further ado, let me introduce the rest of our panel. Senator Laura Ebke from Nebraska, Eric Raudsep from North Carolina, and Valerie Sarwark from New Hampshire. Guys, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, well, it's going to be, it's really your show. I am the facilitator, but I think we should first shout out our new amazing opening made by none other than Eric. And Eric, we should point out, you knocked that out in about 3 hours, right? You scavenged our Facebook pages, found photos of us, threw them together into a slideshow, and then what did you use to make that?
It's an online program called Biteable, and I use it for work quite a bit. We do a lot of like short advertisements and stuff for my home inspection business, and I've gotten to be quite the little aficionado on that one.
Awesome. Well, I think it looked great, and I really appreciate you having that and classing the joint up. And so, first announcement, we're going to make this a regular show. Every Thursday, we are going to start bringing you Libertarians at Large. This is a show that I want all Libertarians at Large to start participating in. We haven't had Josh on yet. He's welcome as soon as he's able to make it. We haven't had Richard on yet, but as you saw, both those guys are in the credits. We're looking forward to having everybody here. But the people that we got, we're going to start talking about some of the big issues of the day. So obviously, the first biggest issue is the charges or lack of charges, as they may be, in the Breonna Taylor case. A lot of people are talking about that. In the end, the grand jury decided that there only one officer was worth even charging with anything, and that was with firing shots that went into somebody else's apartment. Now, I've got a lot of problems with that. I imagine you guys had a lot of problems with that. And I'm going to throw it out to Eric first. Eric, what's your first reaction? What's the things that reach out to you about that?
Well, I think that this goes to show the state of the judicial system in our country. It is an issue that we have large segments of our population that are being left behind and not being protected by our judicial system. We have sections of our society that are being overprotected by our judicial system. And we're no longer the land of the free. That's really what it boils down to.
That's a great analogy because, one of the important things about it is that when the police broke into the house, they didn't break into the house that they thought they were breaking into. And that's obviously one of the hugest issues about that. Valerie, I'm sure you have some thoughts about this as well.
Yes. People are nitpicking all day long on Facebook. Well, they did have a no-knock warrant, but they did knock. And, maybe he was dealing drugs. Maybe she was accepting a suspicious package. The bottom line is not a single crime in our country requires the police officer to come to your house, be your judge, jury, and executioner. And that's it.
It's a fascinating thing because I love using that phrase, judge, jury, and executioner, because we do entrust our police with that tremendous power that at some point in time, they may be called upon to be judge, jury, and executioner. And with that tremendously great power, we hopefully are giving it to people with a tremendous sense of responsibility. And at least to me, it felt like there wasn't a lot of group responsibility over what was going to happen in this scenario. Senator Ebke, I wonder if you have some thoughts about this.
Well, I have some thoughts. Here's the thing. We got to this notion of responsibility, and I think with great power comes great responsibility. That's a Spider-Man reference, and I do think that that the law enforcement need to think about some of these things. So no knock, let's say, knock and, bang the door down or whatever. So, I mean, I think we need to think about what crimes, it's really required to kind of go in guns blazing, so to speak. That said, I wasn't, I wasn't there, and I wasn't in the grand jury room.
I think those are all excellent
so I
points.
think it's a little tougher to the jury was thinking.
Right. Valerie raised an outstanding point, though, and this is one that I thought about for a while. What was the emergency that required the police to enter that apartment? Why couldn't they have waited until the guy they were looking for was outside? Mm-hmm. They could have apprehended him on his way to, to his work or leaving the house or anything like that.
Certainly, if you know where it is, you'd think it would be pretty easy to just kind of hang and wait. So yeah, that's concerning.
Yeah, and that's one of the other things that I think that we talked about in a larger case, and this is something that I think libertarians can advocate for. We are property rights, and a lot of our focus on self-ownership ties property rights to, you own yourself. It's an important part of that. And so it comes to the question of under what circumstances can somebody violate your property rights? And your property rights mean both, your property, but your body as well. And I think that there's a lot of communication that we can do to the general public in terms of how that makes a difference for them. And Val, do you have thoughts about that, about, property rights as pertaining to yourself and property rights as pertaining to when the police should be, what's the emergency that allows them to come in and violate property rights?
Yeah, and your point is absolutely right. What was the emergency? The guy was going to leave, especially if he was dealing drugs. He was definitely going to leave, or somebody was going to come in, or maybe they could have even got a decoy. But my point is, if you come into my house like that, I don't know you're a police officer. I don't know if you're a bad guy or whatever. I don't know if you're in an armed robbery. And we're all libertarians. I'm pretty sure we all have firearms in our house. And so, even the guy who is a libertarian who helps do our yard work, knocks on the door while he's working to ask if he can use the bathroom. And I said, it's okay, you can come in. He was like, well, you guys are libertarians. And I wouldn't just let myself walk into your house knowing that. So I don't know where I was going with that.
No, but it's an outstanding point. We actually have a great point from D. Frank Robinson. And he says, it's not only the police who are endowed with the power of being judge, jury, and executioner in self-defense, right. In defending your own property, you actually are also endowed with that. Frank, that's an outstanding point. Thank you very much for making that. Eric, do you want to continue on this idea of sort of, property rights and defense?
Well, there are many states around the country that have castle law. And
can you explain what castle law is for those?
So castle law in a nutshell is that your home is your castle. In some states, it also extends to your vehicle. And you are able to defend yourself in any way necessary to make sure that you are safe in your home and potentially your vehicle. If that is deadly force, if it's warranted, if it's physical restraint, whatever it needs to be. And I think that's a libertarian value. I mean, we have the right to defend ourselves. And there's no other tip that you can put on that one. I mean, we are our first line of defense in this country, and it needs to be that way.
And one of the fascinating quotes that I heard, I was at a Second Amendment rally in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts is a state with some pretty draconian gun laws. In fact, many of my friends now live in the same state as Valerie because they lived in Massachusetts and had their guns confiscated for any number of reasons. One of them had their cat confiscated at the same time. Crazy state. But I was at a Second Amendment rally and there was a police officer there. And I'm like, thanks for coming out. He's like, I'm a big supporter of, people owning firearms. I mean, I wish everybody would be adequately trained. I think that's a critical thing to do and all that stuff. It's like, but I tell people all the time, we're only minutes away. But if you need somebody in a minute, we're not going to be there. And that's a critical thing, a critical talking point. And so we can meander a little bit into, I think I saw that Smith & Wesson had their best quarter ever last quarter. And it's not surprising. I mean, it's a little bit surprising in that, I know in some states, gun shops aren't considered essential businesses. But in Maryland and a few other states, the ones that originally said that they weren't, they have reopened them and been essential businesses. I know that I'm one of the people that when I realized that lockdown was coming, I said, okay, I want to think of all the things that I should get that nobody else is going to think of. So I did go out and I bought just a ton of plywood, which I'm very happy about. But everybody thought, get ammunition. And so we did a little bit of that. But it's interesting because that's one of the other stories that I want to talk about a little bit, is that we are seeing a lot more supply chain issues popping up in the country right now. And there was a great story about sailors who have been at sea recently and they can't get off the boats because people don't want to admit them because of COVID. And the story that's making the rounds now and on BBC, and I'm sure it'll come to America, is that there was a boat in which somebody had died from a heart attack and they couldn't get the body off. They had to wait 15 days. And yeah, pretty horrific stuff. But, as we're coming into winter and people are starting to talk about, what the winter is going to look like and supply chain and stuff like that, do you guys have any thoughts? Is there anything that you're saying, you know what, I'm going to stock up on this for winter? Like the shipping thing, the big shortage is there are no refrigerators to buy in the United States right now. There are no washing machines and dryers because those all come from big ships overseas. And as they lose sailors and sailors can't get back on the ships, there's just nobody to man the ships anymore. So is there anything you guys are stocking up on? Senator Epke, I know you're in the Midwest right now. Is there anything you're thinking about?
Well, we're trying to, we, like everybody else, are trying to get hold of some ammunition. I just got a new gun and have been having trouble finding enough ammunition so that we can go out and shoot it.
Right, because there's no point in having a new gun. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you can't shoot it, there's no point in having it, right? Yep. But back in March and April, we bought a new freezer, an additional freezer. So we've got now two freezers, and we've got a spare refrigerator in the basement. So we can stock up pretty well if we need to.
Interesting. I mean, that's one of the things that I think really is really valuable. And I've been sort of doing that as well, sort of thinking about what are the things that I think we're going to have shortages of food-wise in the winter. So this is one of the things that I've loved about this time period, is that there's a lot of old stuff that is being learned anew. For example, I didn't know that you could preserve eggs, but you can. You can pickled eggs and they'll last forever. And I see you make that face, Valerie, and that tells me you've never had a pickled egg.
No, I have. My family's from cold country, Pennsylvania. That's like a thing. They're like pickled in beet juice. They're disgusting. I'm sorry.
It's a thing, but not for you.
Not for me, no. That was like what we had every Easter.
Well, I have tried pickled eggs. I won't say that I think that they're the best thing on the planet, but it's easy to store. You don't have to refrigerate them. So I'm stocking up on pickled eggs, and then I might have a small mountain of ramen in the corner.
We did sourdough with the inspiration of the Sarwarks when they were doing that, and so we started doing sourdough bread, and then we decided we just bake bread, which is something that I've been married for 39 years and I've never really done much of that.
Yeah,
except for taking it out of the bag. So yeah,
we have had similar issues with, either like trying to make sourdough. I also was inspired by Nick and Valerie, and and Zane and Ruth and Joel to do sourdough. I did that for a while, but then I learned the no knead sourdough in a Dutch oven, and if you just look it up, no knead with a K, and it is just unbelievable. It's literally this much pre-done yeast, this much flour, this much water. You mix it up with your hands like this, leave it for 12 hours, put it in a Dutch oven, and it's the most amazing bread ever. And so I've moved a little bit away from sourdough starter because it's harder to balance the things out. But if there's a yeast shortage, I'll go back to it again immediately. And it is amazing, right? I mean, for me, right, the closest I'm ever going to get to creating life is yeast. So I'm going to take that as something that I'm very interested in doing. Eric, we haven't come to you about this. Anything that you're thinking about? Like, what are you worried about in the winter?
No, I have to say I'm comfortably prepared. I'm not changing anything that I really have already done. Of course, I would love more ammunition, but as everyone else has said, it's a little hard to come by right now. Mm-hmm. But I think this is also something that we need to really look at in our nation. I mean, we have massive ports, yep, and we're not developing free trade or staging zones where we can hold these containers and allow them to have whatever quarantine period that they need. A lot of these ships are being forced to stay loaded in our ports. It's not a feasible solution, and it's log jamming not only the trade coming directly into our country, but it's log jamming also the trade that continues after our country.
Well, and I think we're
not being good stewards to the world trade market.
I think you're leading into an outstanding libertarian point, which is where libertarians are on the question of price gouging. Yeah. And this is an easy one. Who wants to knock it out of the park? Eric just went. All right, Valerie, you're laughing the most. You get it. So tell us why libertarians think price gouging is awesome.
I mean, I don't, but
all right.
I'm
Anybody
not
else want it?
Libertarian.
Senator Epke, you want to talk about it? Eric, you want to talk about our sort of view on price gouging?
Well, I mean, the market works, and right. If there is, if there's a need, if there's a need for something, go up, and that will inspire more supply to be met. So, yeah, it's a problem if you're on the, but it assures that you get more of your resources, your product in place.
One of my favorite stories is, so I grew up in Galveston, Houston. When Hurricane Harvey came, they flooded out, lots of shortages, especially there were shortages of water because when a city floods, it floods the sewage plants, and then your water supply is corrupted. And so one of the local news stations ran a story of this gas station where a guy had bottles of water and he was selling them for $10 each for the little 16-ounce bottles. And, some people were complaining. Well, one person in line said, I'm glad there's still some here when I got here. If you were selling them at $1 a piece, somebody might have bought them all. Right. Or even worse, if you were selling them $1 a piece, the first 20 people through or the first 100 people would have come through, and then he wouldn't have been a resupply. And the reporter went back there the next day, and there were 5 guys with pickup trucks from San Antonio and Dallas and Fort Worth who drove in with their beds filled with bottles of water, who were undercutting the guy and selling them at $2, which, grant you, is still $1 more than they would normally sell for. But now there were 5,000 water bottles in that spot because the market worked. And that's the classic thing. It's not that we say, oh, we want to, when libertarians say they support price gouging, so we're not saying that we want to traffic in human misery. We're saying that the market fixes things better than anything else. And to that extent, when we're talking about these shortages that are coming up, there's an interesting a question about how much of it really is caused by the government, as you brought up, Eric. Mm-hmm. You guys have any thoughts about that? Anything that you think government could do right away? You want to talk about the Jones Act or
Say get rid of the Jones Act.
well, I mean that's a good one for us, but for the people who aren't familiar with libertarians and the Jones Act, you want to go into that a little bit, Valerie?
Whew. So the Jones Act prevents trade inter-American. Is that?
Yep, it's
So
a
it's
ship.
between, we're like making Puerto Rico pay more to have things, and we could be getting things cheaper to Puerto Rico and shipped in between the mainland and Puerto Rico.
Right. Essentially, it requires that a ship that's traveling between two American ports has to be an American flagged ship. And so it's cheaper to ship something from Los Angeles to Australia and then Australia to Hawaii than it is to ship it straight from Los Angeles to Hawaii, or much more often the reverse. There is a libertarian who makes a macadamia nut liqueur who constantly talks to the party about this. It's like, I would love to, ship this directly to you guys, but I have to ship it to Australia first because of the Jones Act, which is just crazy.
This sounds like the Postal Service.
Right.
It does sound a little bit like the Postal Service.
I live in a town of about, we live about 30 miles south of Lincoln and about an hour and a half, about 90 miles, 75 miles away from Omaha. If I mail something in my town to the utility, it will go to Omaha first. Before they can't deliver it straight from my mailbox to the utility department or to the local whatever. Instead, what they do is they send it up to Omaha, and then a few days later, it'll show back up in Crete.
Which is crazy because I haven't heard about this in a while. I guess the post office has really shut it down. But when I was a kid, every year you heard about some kid getting busted for delivering local mail in their city's downtown. I mean, obviously Texas is lousy with small little cities, but I mean, I specifically remember LaGrange because LaGrange is famous for other things in Texas as well. But there was a guy, it was a 12-year-old kid on his bicycle, just nonstop circling, delivering the mail right after school. And it was awesome. Businesses would put things in his basket and he'd drop them off, stuff like that. And, of course, the post office has, the power of the federal government behind him. So, they brought in the FBI to really scare the kid. You're not allowed to deliver the mail. That type of thing. But in reality, if it didn't work, nobody would buy it.
Wonder why they're bankrupt.
Well, and so it's interesting because, of course, what's the reason that the people are really talking about the post office right now?
Ballots.
Mail-in ballots, exactly. Which leads us to our next exciting clip. I'm going to play you guys a little clip, and then we're going to get to comment on it. Let's see if I can do this right.
Questions? We'll take a few questions. Yeah.
Right here, Mr. President, real quickly, win, lose, or draw in this election, will you commit here today for a peaceful transferal of power after the election? And there has been rioting in Louisville, there's been rioting in many cities across this country, red and your so-called red and blue states. Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster. And
that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
we want to get rid of the ballots, and you'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation.
So that's where it sort of went off the rails because I think for a moment the president was doing a pretty good job, and I don't say that about him a lot, of dealing with somebody who was trying to be combative. The guy's like, will you commit to being... And then all of a sudden he says, well, if you get rid of the ballots, then there won't be a transfer of power. There'll be a continuation. So where do we start with something like that? Eric, why don't you kick us off?
I swear, he is the death of democracy sometimes. I have no words. I mean, the president is really just, like you said, off the rails. There's no other way around that one.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, one of the things that people talk about that is truly, that was unique, that we wrote into, that the founders wrote, was the peaceful transference of power. And you know, one of the most inspirational things I have seen in a while, there's a picture of George Washington. Said, you know, George Washington is famous for all these things that he did, right? He was the general. You know, he warned us against political parties. You know, he had this tremendous, but he should be most famous for the thing that he didn't do. He could have been king, and he chose not to be. And that is such an important part of our American history. And I think that's why people are so alarmed to hear the president say, well, there won't be a transition, there'll be a continuation. And now,
Well,
go ahead,
not
Eric.
only that, but you also have Thomas Paine after he left the United States and went on to the French Revolution, and he was reading over the peaceful transference of power. He was astounded that the Americans were scheduling their revolutions, and that's exactly. I mean, it was an outsider opinion, but that's exactly how it came across.
Right, and that's a really good point. You want to talk about that a little bit. So, right, 1789 is the start of the French Revolution, and when we talk about too the American Revolution, this is one of the another sort of important topic, is that when we rebelled, when I say we, when America, the colonies rebelled, England was dominatingly the freest state in the world, right? I mean, you didn't have tremendous social mobility, but certainly you had a lot more social mobility than you did in France or in the German principalities or, you know, other places. And Americans revolted against that because we didn't want to be freest. We wanted to be free. And that's a difference. And I think that's something that chafes against a lot of Americans right now, is that we recognize, even now, you can make an argument, we are the freest country in the world. But raise your hand if you really feel free. I see no hands. And so that's an interesting point. So let's go back a little bit. Now, did you think that the reporter was being a little bit combative? Well, let's be fair about that. Valerie says no. Yeah.
I don't think so. I think he was. With every question you have to ask Trump, you have to say it 3 or 4 times. It's like he doesn't understand, and so I think they're all used to like talking to a child. You know, I have to ask you this question until you answer it, and then you get these goofy answers that later some other GOP senator or congressman or something will say, "Well, he was just joking," and then, you know, like in November we're figuring out how to overthrow a king because he was just joking, but just kidding, he wasn't actually joking. So,
Well,
yeah.
so it's interesting because it's a question that certainly could be answered in the right way. And so I'm going to immediately put you on the spot, Senator Ebke, when you get elected and in the middle of and right before your midterm, I say, Senator, can you guarantee me that there will be a peaceful transition of power regardless of the results of the election?
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. I mean, the thing is here. I think that Trump is the ultimate, and there's sort of a symbiotic trolling relationship now going on between the president and the media. Now, that's not much of anything, but I think that we're now to the point where both sides are just trying to one up each other, and I think sometimes the president.
What happened? Oh, no.
Says bigger into an even bigger tizzy, and so then they start asking questions like this. And I mean, I saw that Mitch McConnell even and some of the other Republicans said, "Whoa, wait a second," today. So, you know, I don't think that this is. I don't think that we've got to worry too much about it, at least at the
Right. You know, there's a story. There's a story. A colleague of mine now. unlike the rest of you, maybe Senator Epke, you were also alive during Watergate, but I can remember my mother putting me in front of the television to watch Nixon's resignation speech, and a colleague of mine was working. He actually worked for the DOD as a contractor at the time, and he was in the DC area, and they were frightened. They didn't know what was going to happen. They thought that there was a potential that the Army would be involved, and I don't know that this is true. It's anecdotal, but you can certainly hear people who say that at the time there was a deal with the governors of Maryland and Virginia that their National Guard would come in if there were a real problem, and it points to the genius of our system that I have to stop putting the hand in front of the camera. It points to the genius of our system that the Army doesn't work for the president, right? The Army works for the people, and it doesn't operate on American soil. Only the National Guard is supposed to do that. So with that, and talking about sort of these esoteric issues of law and American history, it's time for our new favorite segment, the news quiz. Let me find this. Here we are. This is, if I can quote the president, the Crooked New York Times. The Crooked New York Times puts together a news quiz every week, and I thought that we would go through that and talk about these questions as they come through. So the first question is, Breonna Taylor's family in the city of Louisville, Kentucky, reached an agreement to settle the wrongful death lawsuit brought after the young woman was killed in a botched police raid in March. Which of the following were terms of the settlement? We have to get them all right to get this answer right. 1, the city will acknowledge wrongdoing. 2, the city will adopt a number of police reforms. 3, the city will pay Ms. Taylor's family $12 million. 4, the city will rename the street where Ms. Taylor lived in her memory. So I think we all know the $12 million one, right?
Yeah.
All right. Did the city acknowledge any wrongdoing?
Is it paying $12 million for wrongful death, basically saying that you?
Oh, I definitely think not. I know a lot of times, and if you want to consult with the other lawyer in your house, where people are willing to say, yeah, we'll spend a lot of money to not admit wrongdoing.
That's true. That's true.
What about, are they going to rename the street after her? I didn't hear that at all.
I don't think that was part of the settlement.
All right. Will the city acknowledge wrongdoing, and will they adopt a number of police reforms? I think police reforms.
I feel like I heard something about reforms. I feel like I heard something about police reforms. I didn't know.
All right. Let me click that. I don't seem to be able to click them. All right. Well, we're just going to have to guess. All right. Next one. Our next question. Israel and 2 Arab countries. Well, I think if I stop sharing them, let me try this. All right. So now let's see if I can click them because I'm not sharing them. Nope, that didn't fix anything. All right. I'm terrible at this. Israel and 2 Arab countries signed an agreement at the White House to normalize their relationships. One was the UAE. What was the other? Your choices are Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, or Saudi Arabia.
No, Bahrain. Bahrain, not Bahrain.
I also think it's Bahrain.
I think not.
You think it's not Bahrain? You think it's Kuwait, Oman, or Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
Bahrain or Kuwait.
Yeah, I was going to say, we would know if it was Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Because that would be a huge deal, because Saudi Arabia pays a tremendous amount of money to keep the region destabilized.
But so we don't really know what the answers are here, right? We're not going to know.
We
have to look it up.
At the end, I get to, if I go down here to the bottom, we get to submit our answers and then find out what the answers are. I think. Although I wasn't able to click on the correct answer, so I'm not guaranteeing anything. You know what? I'm pretty sure our answers. Look, somebody has already told us it's Bahrain.
Oh, I was wrong.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
I'm here for comic relief only.
Right. That's good though.
Do you have time to
because-
read, Valerie?
No, I was going to say all I did today, the only television I got to watch today was freaking Daniel Tiger. So yeah, I don't know.
So I actually watched, some of you might have seen, if we're going to talk about innovative television, I posted something on Facebook. This woman goes to consignment stores with essentially her cell phone. She finds a whole bunch of clothes and says to the owner of the consignment store, I believe that I can sell these on Facebook. I sell them, and she sells them for $5 each. And she says, I will give you $1 for each one of these, gets them out of your store, et cetera, et cetera. And then she just does a Facebook live stream. She says, okay, I've got this thing. She opens it up. This was, and there were names that I don't really remember, but like this was an Ann Taylor thing. And it's like, it's stretchy. And she shows, and this size, it's number 747. And then people write in the comments of the live stream, I'll buy 747. And I watched for like half an hour, and she sold like 200 pieces of clothing. Unbelievable. Well, first of it is, I think that people are really psyched that it feels like shopping. But the other thing about it is, and it's $5, right? Why wouldn't you want to buy something? And then sometimes you see something. And I confess, I know nothing about women's clothing, right? I know nothing about the fashion or anything like that. But it was amazing to see this entrepreneur at work. And that's one of the things that I love. The only thing that gets us out of all of this, right, is innovation. It's the entrepreneurs really getting things going. And so seeing somebody finding a way to make money, selling stuff over Facebook, that was very inspirational for me. All right, question number 3. Where did Hurricane Sally make landfall? Your choices are the Alabama-Florida state line, the Alabama-Mississippi state line, the Louisiana and Mississippi state line, or Louisiana and Texas state line.
Louisiana, Texas?
No, I think it's Louisiana, Mississippi.
It's definitely near. It's one of them, Louisiana, because we see Keith Thompson and Susan. Their roof blew off their house and like a tree fell on it, and they're in Louisiana. So
well, except that wasn't Sally. That was Laura.
There've been so many this year.
Right. Well, because the one that just hit Houston is Beta, right? They went through the alphabet and then they used Greek names.
I think it's Alabama and Florida.
Alabama and Florida. All right. Well, so here's the thing. Let's ask the audience. The audience says it was either Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Florida, or Florida and Alabama. So they don't know either. We appreciate you guys doing it. Somebody want to look it up? Let us know.
oh my god!
All right. Question number 4. Nobody told me there was going to be math on the quiz. What chemical did astronomers detect in Venus's atmosphere? Carbon dioxide, hydrogen chloride, phosphine, or sulfur dioxide?
It's red, so sulfur dioxide.
I'm going to guess that carbon dioxide. No, it can't be carbon dioxide because that's the greenhouse gas, and Venus is famous as being the planet of greenhouse gases. So it's not carbon dioxide. At least they wouldn't be surprised by that. Josh McCose swears that he looked it up and that it was Alabama and Florida.
Okay.
All right, so thank you, Josh.
Laura got it.
So you think sulfur dioxide?
I do.
All right.
I'm going to go with Valerie on this one. Sulfur dioxide.
All right.
Never to be let down. I don't know what I'm talking about.
I don't think phosphine is a chemical. I think it's a fake chemical. And hydrogen chloride, it's a compound, but I don't think it would be surprising because it's, James Bo Thuvenel says phosphine. And with a name like that, he's got to be right.
You're probably right, yeah.
All right. But we'll see. We're gonna find all the answers afterwards. Oh, again, phosphine. So more people think that it's phosphine. I mean, this could be the fake news. But
I'm getting all the answers wrong on purpose to make everybody feel really good.
this is a good strategy.
I'm sorry I followed you, Valerie, on that one.
All right. Phosphine is not only a real chemical, it's the correct answer. Thanks, Bob. We appreciate that. All right. If somebody wants to add a little comment telling me what phosphine is, that's good. Number 5, what crime did a top Trump health aide without evidence accuse scientists of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention of committing? Is it A, fraud, B, murder, C, sedition, D, treason?
Sedition. I did see that one. That's
Interesting.
Yeah.
My
I don't even know.
my memory. You know what? I just had an idea. Let me see. Sorry. We can talk about this a little bit, but of course, my favorite reference for sedition is John Adams with the Alien and Sedition Act. Let's see. All right, I'm not going to try to do two things at once, especially while we're on the air. All right, so we're sedition. Everybody agrees it's sedition. Robert Daniels says it's fraud, but I think that Valerie sounded so sure. I'm not going to doubt her that it was sedition. Although it is.
I think it was more serious than fraud.
Right. It's right. Sedition is strong. But let's see. Yeah, there's a little more sedition. Carl Simpson, Raven Reeves, and I, this is a fact. People with four names always tell the truth. So Carl Simpson, Raven Reeves says sedition. We're going to go with that. Question number 6. Sarah McBride is set to become the highest ranking transgendered official in the United States. What position was she nominated for? A, Senate. B, House. C, State Senate. D, State House. And I confess, I don't know.
I know it's a state position. I just can't remember if it's a state Senate or a state House position.
Interesting. I also do not know that.
I'm thinking it's state Senate.
I agree with Eric because I feel like.
All right. I did magically figure out how to make it store our answers so we can find out what we did wrong. I'm going to run through them quickly. We said that it was Bahrain. We said, it tells us the answer when I get it right. Okay. Oh. So it was Bahrain. Let's go down to where we are. We'll assume we're right. Sarah McBride, set to become the highest ranking transgendered official in the United States. Senate seat, House seat, state Senate seat, or state House seat? And I confess, I don't know. But I would know if a senator was being installed right now because they'd be voting on the next Supreme Court justice. Speaking of which, have any of you guys seen there is a group of people now who are saying that they insist that there be a justice nominated and installed, and they are using the slogan, "No justice, no peace," which is terrible.
Hacking.
Clever. Nobody else saw it coming, but terrible.
Yeah, that's right.
Sarah McBride is set to become the highest ranking transgendered official in the United States. State Senate, State House.
I'm sticking with state Senate. I'm fairly certain.
I'll go with Eric on this. I don't know,
All
but
right.
yeah,
agree.
State Senate.
Yes,
Yay.
Ms.
Good
McBride,
job,
state
Eric.
Senate seat
Yes.
in Delaware. So I don't know how I don't know that. I live right next to Delaware.
And outright libertarians will continue to be proud of me. There we go.
Good job. Well, so interesting question. What is Delaware most famous for?
The screen door factory.
The what?
The screen door factory.
That I have no idea what you're talking about.
Wayne's World.
Credit cards.
For me, I always liked that their license plate said "First in Freedom." They were the first state to ratify the Constitution, which, considering they were the smallest state as well. Although actually, I guess they're not small as Rhode Island. Number 7. Which conference?
I know
Laura
this
knows
answer.
this. I know. Which one is it, Laura? Just tell us straight up.
Big Ten.
The Big
Big
Ten
Ten.
is indeed correct. Big Ten will join the Big 12, Southeastern, and the Atlantic Coast in playing football. Big Ten contains such famous colleges as Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio,
Nebraska.
The Big Ten now.
Nebraska.
No, Nebraska's in the Big 12.
No, we're in the Big Ten.
What?
That's how I know. Yes.
Okay. I thought Nebraska, Colorado, Oklahoma, and somebody else joined the Big 12 when the Southwest Conference went away.
Oh,
All right.
yeah. And then we left the Big 12 and went to the Big 10.
Oh, you left the Big 12. See, that's after I moved out of Texas. At that point in time, college football was dead to me. Oh boy. This is the worst thing I've ever done as a libertarian, apparently.
Oh, no.
All right.
Been nice knowing you, Dan.
Yep. Well, I always knew it was going to be something. So, all right, here we go. Question number 8. Yoshihide Suga became the new prime minister of Japan. Whom did he replace? Shinzo Abe, Taro Aso, Toshimitsu Motegu or Yoshihoko Noda?
Good job, Dan.
Thanks. Well, so I'm pretty sure I know that this is Abe. If you guys
I
agree
think
with me,
it
I'm
is,
going to
yeah.
click it.
I do.
That's the name I recognize.
It is. He was the longest serving prime minister. Resigned late last month because of ill health. So, Japan is a fascinating question for Jared Hall right behind us with Abe. Thanks, Jared. You are correct. Because Japan is the most industrialized country with the most debt. They're running like a 20-to-1 debt to GDP. And it's a really fascinating story because their culture is in a weird place right now. They're not having children. And as a result, and I say they're not having children with, the Americans aren't really having children, Valerie accepted. But the Japanese have a real problem right now that they're so age orientated. They're so heavily older than younger population. And it's a very interesting thing because they've accumulated this enormous debt that the older people have spent. And now there are no young people, or relatively speaking, who are going to be paying it off. But maybe they don't care. It's a fascinating study, though, for people who are interested in economics. The fact that they're running at roughly 20-to-1 debt to GDP. The American West isn't the only place on Earth that's burning. Name one of the other countries that is also experiencing its worst wildfire in decades. Argentina, Italy, Korea, or Mexico?
I need to go put my kids to bed, and I just heard one of them call for me. But now I want to do this. We should do this at the beginning of the show.
All right, we'll do this at the beginning next time. But Valerie, you make your guess, and we're going to pick it.
I don't know. I feel Argentina because it's really dry there, right?
Argentina is correct. All right, go put your kids to bed and tell them stories of wildfires.
No, I'm gonna tell them I had them so that they can pay off my debts.
All right, that's a good story too. Thank you, Valerie, for joining us.
Bye.
All right, 3 of us left and 2 more questions. Which company did TikTok choose to be the technology partner for U.S. operations? Is it Instagram, Microsoft, Oracle, or Palantir?
It's Oracle.
It is Oracle. Because you're down there in the triangle, right, Eric?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
For those of you who aren't familiar, the Carolina Triangle is Raleigh. I don't know what else is in it.
Durham and Chapel Hill, and we are the Silicon Valley of the East.
My favorite operating system, Red Hat, is based out of there.
It is.
At one point in time, I almost moved down there to take a job, and then I stayed in Boston because. And I look forward to being corrected about this, but I've heard that North Carolina skiing, there's like a week where it's okay.
That's lucky.
Okay, fair enough. Good to know. So Oracle
water skiing year round.
Water skiing year round, and that's exactly what they said to me in the interview. They're like, you can't do that. They're like, but for the price of your house in Boston, you can buy, a house with a dock on the water and a giant boat, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, maybe, but I didn't do it. All right, last question. Netflix is facing backlash after releasing the award-winning French film Cuties on its platform. What do critics accuse the film of? Ableism, animal abuse, sexualizing children, or transphobia? Awkward for all of us.
Children,
it's sexualizing children. That's what people are complaining about. Controversial. I think that we can dodge over most of that, but I do think that it's a really good. The news quiz is a good thing. It gives us a lot of things to talk about. The one that I kind of want to go back to is the forest fires, because a lot of people wonder what a libertarian solution to forest fires would look like. So I'm going to throw that out to the panel. Do you guys have thoughts, comments, anything in particular you want to say about that? Eric, I can tell you're ready to go.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of fire suppression systems that are ready to be rolled out by independent companies. There's chemicals that will starve fires of oxygen. There is better forest management and selective harvesting of trees, so the tree growth isn't as packed to begin with, and fire is going to be less likely to spread. You have to remember, in the United States, we have more trees today than we did at the turn of the last century, between in the year 1900.
One of my favorite statistics. Can you tell us why that's true?
Because actually, of a lot of the paper companies are planting 3 trees for every tree that they cut down, even though they are only required to plant 2. Also, on top of that, we wouldn't need the trees to the level that we have today if we would encourage hemp growth. And not only that, but hemp also sequesters more carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide, than tree growth does. So, I mean, we could kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We can make a positive indentation into global warming, and we can also replenish our ability to manufacture paper in the United States at a much higher rate. So, yeah, there's a lot that libertarians can do to manage forest fires, from preventing the forest from ever going up in flames, to not only that, but also new technologies on how to fight fire more effectively that are not approved by the United States government at this time.
And there's also an interesting thought that if it's not your job to prevent forest fires, right? If you're not in charge of the land around you, you're sort of hamstrung.
Yeah.
You can't go out and cut down trees to make sure that the forest that's around you is in a tinderbox ready to go.
I feel like we need a cut video for Smokey the Bear right now.
Give a hoot. No, that's not it.
No.
Only you can prevent
forest fires. Exactly right. So it's a really good point, though, because at one point in time, we believed that, right? We believed that only you prevent forest fires, but now I haven't seen that commercial in ages.
No.
Only the government's supposed to be preventing forest fires. People aren't supposed to take that. That's a really outstanding point. One of the things that I've wondered about for a while is, all right, this is not on the quiz, Eric, but do you know who Red Adair is? No. Laura, do you remember Red Adair? All right, this is a Texas question. Red Adair.
I remember the name, yeah.
He used to put out oil wells that caught on fire. As you can imagine, that's a true.
Wayne.
Exactly right.
John Wayne
made that movie.
The Hellfighters.
Exactly right.
Yep.
And one of the things that they would do is they would surround the oil well that, oil shooting out is just fire shooting up into the sky. They would surround it with dynamite, and they would detonate all the dynamite simultaneously, and it would put the fire out. Bob Hazelwood, Bob knew it. And it's one of the
they're fighting a lot of the fires, the oil field fires that are in Iraq.
Yep.
They're still using dynamite today.
Yep, exactly right. Now, Eric, I know you're a veteran. Did you see service in Iraq?
No.
Okay. I was wondering if you'd seen them put out those oil wells in person, because that would be an amazing story to tell.
No. I was strictly conist. Thank you very much.
Fair enough. It is an interesting thing. So, I want to talk about a couple of libertarian things coming up. So next week is going to be the Libertarian big disappointment, right? We are not going to have Joe Jorgensen in the debate unless something really changes. And normally, right, they make a small pretense of keeping us out of the debate, but this time it's been particularly terrible. Laura, do you want to talk about like some of the issues that we've had in terms of Joe getting into the debate this cycle?
Well, it's almost impossible, just because the presidential debate commission, but they're controlled by the Republicans and Democrats. And if you look at the list of people who started it, it was national chairs or former national chairs of the committees. And then you have the issue that, they say, well, you got to have 15% in the polls. Well, if you're not being included in the polls, you can't get 15% to begin with, right? But here's the exciting thing. Next week, while we aren't going to be in the debates, they are having a great event I'm gonna promote this a little bit. They're having a great event in Alexandria, Virginia, on Wednesday night, I think it is. Wednesday night.
Yep, there is an
with
event.
Joe
Go
Jorgen,
ahead.
and I am flying to DC to see this.
Yeah, that's going to be pretty amazing. I am excited about that. I mean, it's going to be an amazing event in Alexandria.
Yeah.
Let me just find the exact
Yeah.
thing for that. Oh, it's not up on the website yet. But yeah, that's going to be a big event. And the other thing about it, of course, you said, it's difficult to get to that 15%. Last year, it was difficult to get to that 15%. But Gary Johnson got kind of close, right? He was at 12, 13%. So this year, when they did the poll, the question that they ask now is, if the election were today, who would you vote for, Donald Trump or Joe Biden? And those are the only answers that they've accepted. And so it makes it really difficult for Jo Jorgensen to get to 15% when nobody can say that they're voting for her on the poll. And it's astonishing. And the thing that galls me the most is that one of those polling organizations is PBS and NPR, who are paid for with taxpayer money. Now, obviously, I wish they weren't paid for with taxpayer money. I wish that we didn't have taxes going towards things that the free market could very easily take care of. But if they are going to take my money, shouldn't they at least put my candidate, our candidate, into the debates? Mm-hmm. So the other thing about it,
yeah.
So then the other thing about it, and Eric, I wonder if you can comment on this. Did you know that if a candidate participates in any debate that is not sponsored by the CPD, that they are then banned from participating in a CPD debate?
Yeah, actually, that's part of the outrage that the CPD has with Donald Trump opening his mouth and saying that he wants to have another debate with Joe Rogan. So, I mean, they're thinking about penalizing Donald Trump just because he opened his mouth and said he would entertain the idea of.
How are they going to penalize the president? Sorry, you can't be the Republican nominee now.
I know. Well, I'm sure it's going to be, much like impeachment, a little slap on the wrist and go, bad Donald Trump, and we move on from there. But who knows? It's the CPD. They do whatever they want.
And they have for a long time. And the sad thing is that they are holding us hostage. They're holding the country hostage. And at a time when we could be unifying, right? The argument is that libertarians actually have the best argument for unification because we want everybody to have what you want. I'm going to quote Larry Sharp. Larry Sharp says, if you want to be a Republican, be as Republican as you want to be. If you want to be a Democrat, be as democratic as you want to be.
Absolutely.
Just don't make anybody else live by your moral code. Go ahead, Eric.
Oh, no. But what really amazes me is how the CPD got even created in the first place.
Right.
That
happened because of they didn't like the questions they were being asked.
Well, no, actually, it had a part to do with Ross Perot because the League of Women's Voters, the League of Women's Voters was running the debates at the time when Ross Perot was brought on to the stage, and
so the I'm going to step in. The CPD is created a little bit before that because Ross Perot was in the '92 election, and the last League of Women Voters was 1988. And
is that when CPD got exclusivity?
Yeah, that's when they got the exclusivity, and that's when the League of Women Voters said, we're not going to do it anymore. Right. And the CPD asked them to host a debate, and they're like, no, this is a fraud. We're not going to be involved in this fraud that you want to commit. And then when the CPD took over, they said, we're going to set the bar at 5%, because nobody's ever going to get to 5%. But Ross Perot was at 7%. Right. And so if you have a pickup truck and you drive it into the ditch, sorry, I loved Ross Perot in those debates. Those were, that was a big deal. And then they changed it and then they made it a lot worse. And now it is essentially a mathematical possibility, even if they were to ask the question, if the election were today, who would you vote for? Because anybody who says, I'm going to wait and watch the debates to make up my mind, counts against a candidate getting to 15%. And, frankly, we don't think that libertarians should automatically have people's votes, although the Republican Party and the Democratic Party believes that they own the votes of the members in their party.
Oh yeah.
However, I'm going to go to our last point, and then I'm going to wrap it up. We talked about the idea that you can be as Republican as you want, you can be as Democratic as you want. The thing that we have always done really well here in the United States is religious freedom. We have Hindus and Jews and Christians and Muslims and Buddhists and Sikhs and spaghetti monster, everything, anything you can think of. We all live together, right? And nobody ever thinks that they would impose their will on each other. And the idea that if we had an election and Catholics won, we would all have to live under the Catholic rules for the next 4 years, that's an idea that is abhorrent to Americans. So how can we believe so strongly in religious freedom and not believe in political freedom?
It's a great correlation.
So with that, I really want to thank everybody in the audience for tuning in. I want to thank my guests, Senator Laura Ebke, Eric Raudsep, Valerie Sarwark. You are watching LPTV. This is a broadcast of the Libertarian Party. We are the party of principle. We have a candidate, Joe Jorgensen, who's on the ballot in all 50 states, plus DC. Please tell your friends. They can find out about Joe Jorgensen at joe20.com. You can find out more about the Libertarian Party at lp.org. We look forward to seeing you guys here again next week. Say goodnight, Gracie.
Good night, Gracie.